You've been lied to your entire life. They told you to be kind. They told you to be gentle. They told you that love conquers all, and that if you just treat people with enough warmth and generosity, they'll naturally respect you. They said respect is earned through goodness, through sacrifice, through putting others first. And you believed them. You tried it. You smiled when you wanted to scream. You gave when you had nothing left. You bent over backwards to accommodate people who wouldn't bend an inch for you. And what did it get you? Disappointment. Betrayal. Being overlooked, underestimated, and walked all over like a welcome mat at the entrance of everyone else's ambitions. Here's what nobody wants to admit. What makes people uncomfortable at dinner parties? What gets you labeled as cynical or dark or problematic? Respect doesn't come from love. It comes from fear. Not the paralyzing, traumatic fear that destroys, but the strategic, calculated fear that commands attention and establishes boundaries. The kind of fear that makes people think twice before crossing you, before dismissing you, before assuming they can take advantage of your kindness. Machiavelli understood this 500 years ago when he wrote the words that still make idealists uncomfortable. It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. This isn't about becoming a tyrant. This isn't about cruelty for the sake of cruelty. This is about understanding a fundamental truth of human nature that you've been conditioned to ignore. People respect power. They respect consequences. They respect someone who won't tolerate disrespect. And whether you like it or not, whether it fits into your pretty picture of how the world should work, fear is the language of respect that everyone understands instantly, universally, without translation. You've seen it yourself. Think about the people in your life who command the most respect. Not the ones people say they respect because it's the right thing to say, but the ones who actually get respect, who walk into a room and change the energy, whose words carry weight, whose boundaries are never tested. Are they the nicest people you know? Are they the ones constantly seeking approval, desperate to be liked, bending themselves into pretzels to accommodate everyone? Or are they the ones with a certain edge, a line you know not to cross, a presence that says without words, "I will not be disrespected"? The truth makes you uncomfortable because you've been trained to associate fear with evil. You've been conditioned to believe that inspiring fear means you're a bad person, a villain, someone on the wrong side of morality. But Machiavelli wasn't writing fairy tales. He was writing about reality, about power, about how the world actually works when you strip away the comforting illusions. And the reality is this: when people love you but don't fear you, they take liberties. They cross boundaries. They assume your kindness is weakness. They mistake your patience for permission. But when people fear you even a little, they respect your space, your time, your word. They think before they act. They measure their approach. They recognize that you are not someone to be trifled with. Let's be clear about what we mean by fear. We're not talking about the fear a hostage feels for their captor. We're talking about the respect that comes from knowing someone has standards, consequences, and the spine to enforce them. It's the difference between a teacher whose students ignore them because they're nice, and a teacher whose students pay attention because they know there will be consequences for disrespect. Same classroom, same material, different outcome. The difference isn't cruelty. It's the presence or absence of fear. Your problem is that you've been trying to earn respect through love alone, and it's exhausting. You give and give and give, hoping that eventually people will recognize your value, that they'll respect you because of how much you care, how hard you try, how selflessly you sacrifice. But here's what actually happens. They take. They consume your kindness like it's an unlimited resource. They come to expect it, to feel entitled to it. And the moment you can't deliver, the moment you set a boundary or say no or prioritize yourself, they're shocked, offended, even angry. How dare you stop being their emotional doormat? How dare you expect reciprocity? This is the trap of seeking respect through love. Love without fear becomes exploitation. Kindness without consequences becomes a free-for-all. Generosity without boundaries becomes martyrdom. You become the person everyone likes but nobody respects, the one they call when they need something but never consider when decisions are being made, opportunities are distributed, or voices are being heard. You're nice, sure, You're sweet. You're harmless. And in a world that respects power, harmless means invisible. Machiavelli wrote The Prince not as a philosophical exercise, but as a practical manual for survival in a brutal world. He watched as well-meaning, kind-hearted rulers were overthrown, betrayed, and destroyed by people they trusted, people they loved, people they treated with generosity and grace. He saw that goodness alone doesn't protect you. Virtue alone doesn't command loyalty. And love alone certainly doesn't guarantee respect. What protects you, what commands loyalty, what guarantees respect is power, and the willingness to use it. Think about the last time someone disrespected you. Maybe they ignored your boundary. Maybe they spoke to you dismissively. Maybe they made a decision that affected you without consulting you. Maybe they took credit for your work or invalidated your feelings or simply treated you like you didn't matter. Now ask yourself, would they have done that if they feared you? If they knew there would be real consequences, immediate and proportional? If they understood that crossing you meant something, cost something, changed something in the dynamic between you? The answer is no. They did it because they could, because they knew you'd absorb it, rationalize it, forgive it, because there was no fear and therefore no respect. Here's the shift you need to make, the reframe that changes everything. Respect isn't something you earn by being good. It's something you command by being formidable, by making it clear, through your actions and your energy and your unwillingness to tolerate nonsense, that you are not someone to be taken lightly. You don't do this by being mean. You do it by being consistent, by enforcing consequences, by showing people through experience that your boundaries are real, that your word means something, that disrespecting you has a cost. Let's talk about consequences, because this is where most people fail. They set boundaries but don't enforce them. They make threats but don't follow through. They tell people what they will and won't accept, but when the line is crossed, they do nothing. And people learn quickly. They learn that your boundaries are suggestions, your threats are empty, your standards are negotiable. And once they learn that, you've lost all leverage. The fear that could have protected you, that could have commanded respect, evaporates. You become predictable, manageable, safe to ignore. Machiavelli understood that consequences must be swift, certain, and proportional. When a boundary is crossed, there must be an immediate response. Not a discussion about feelings, not a gentle reminder. A consequence. If someone disrespects your time, they lose access to it. If someone violates your trust, they lose your confidence. If someone takes advantage of your generosity, the generosity stops. No warnings, no second chances based on potential or promises. Just clean, clear consequences that teach people what happens when they forget who they're dealing with. This feels harsh to you because you've been conditioned to value harmony over respect, to prioritize other people's comfort over your own dignity. You've been taught that being understanding, being forgiving, being endlessly patient is the mark of a good person. And maybe it is. But it's also the mark of a person who will be perpetually disrespected, perpetually overlooked, perpetually taken for granted, because people don't respect endless patience. They exploit it. Look at the people who command respect in your world. Look at your most successful colleagues, your most influential friends, the leaders and decision-makers and power players in any field. They're not universally loved. In fact, many of them are controversial, polarizing, even disliked by significant numbers of people. But they're respected. People might not want to have dinner with them, but they listen when they speak. They might not agree with them, but they don't dismiss them. They might not like them, but they sure as hell don't cross them casually. Why? Because there's an element of fear. Not terror, but awareness. Awareness that this is someone with power, with standards, with the willingness to use both. You've been operating under the delusion that you can have universal love and genuine respect simultaneously. You can't. The two are often inversely related. The more you prioritize being loved, being liked, being approved of by everyone, the less you're respected. Because the behaviors that generate love, accommodation, flexibility, selflessness, putting others first, are the opposite of the behaviors that generate respect. Boundaries, standards, selectivity, putting yourself first. Love says yes, respect says no. Love bends. Respect stands firm. Love seeks to please. Respect expects to be pleased. This doesn't mean you have to choose between being loved and being respected. Machiavelli acknowledged that having both is ideal. But when forced to choose, when you can't have both, respect must come first. Because respect protects you. Respect gives you agency. Respect means your voice matters. Your decisions count. Your presence has weight. Love without respect is just people enjoying your company while simultaneously dismissing your importance. It's being everyone's favorite pushover. Let's address the fear you have about this shift. You're afraid that if you prioritize being feared over being loved, you'll become isolated, lonely, the villain in other people's stories. You're afraid people will leave. You're afraid you'll look back at your life and realize you sacrificed connection for power, warmth for control. This fear is understandable, but misplaced. The isolation you're trying to avoid is already happening. You're surrounded by people who take from you, who use you, who benefit from your presence but don't respect it. That's not connection. That's exploitation with a smile. When you shift to commanding respect through strategic fear, something interesting happens. Yes, some people leave. The users, the takers, the people who were only around because you made their lives easy with no expectation of reciprocity, they go. And good riddance. But the people who remain, the ones who can meet you at this new level, they're different. They respect your boundaries because they have their own. They value your time because they value their own. They treat you well, not because they have to, not because you're too nice to hold them accountable, but because they genuinely want to maintain the relationship. They fear losing access to you, and that fear keeps them honest, keeps them respectful, keeps them reciprocal. The relationships built on mutual respect, where both parties maintain a healthy degree of fear about losing the other, are stronger than relationships built on unconditional love. Because unconditional love, beautiful as it sounds, often becomes unconditional tolerance of disrespect. When someone knows you'll love them no matter what, when there's no fear of loss, no concern about consequences, they stop trying. They take you for granted. They get comfortable in their disrespect. But when there's an element of fear, a knowledge that you could walk away, that you will enforce boundaries, that there are limits to what you'll accept, they stay conscious. They stay appreciative. They stay respectful. Machiavelli wrote for rulers, but his principles apply to anyone who wants to navigate the world with sovereignty. You are the ruler of your own life, the authority over your own boundaries, the enforcer of your own standards. And if you want to be respected in that role, if you want people to take you seriously, you need to inspire a healthy fear of what happens when they don't. This isn't about being cruel or capricious or unpredictable. It's about being firm, consistent, and unapologetic in your expectations. Here's how this plays out practically. Someone asks you for a favor that violates your boundary. In your old operating system, you'd say yes despite the violation because saying no feels mean, and you want to be loved. In your new operating system, you say no clearly and without elaborate justification. They might be surprised, even offended. They might push back. But you hold the line. No explanation, no apology, no negotiation. Just no. And in that moment, you establish something crucial. You're not someone who can be pressured, manipulated, or guilted into abandoning your boundaries. There's a fear, a healthy respect, that forms around that realization. Or someone speaks to you dismissively, with a tone or attitude that disrespects you. Old you absorbs it, rationalizes it, maybe brings it up later in a gentle, non-confrontational way that invites them to dismiss your feelings a second time. New you addresses it immediately and directly, not with emotion, not with a long explanation of how it made you feel, but with a clear statement of what's acceptable and what's not. And if it happens again, there are consequences. Reduced access, reduced warmth, reduced investment in the relationship. You don't announce these consequences. You just implement them. And people learn. This learning is the fear we're talking about. Not fear of violence or abuse, but fear of consequences, fear of loss, fear that their actions matter and have real effects on how you treat them. This fear is respect. This fear is healthy. This fear keeps people honest and relationships functional. You've been operating in a world where you fear everyone else's reactions more than they fear yours. You fear being disliked, being judged, being called difficult or cold or mean. And because you live in that fear, you tolerate disrespect to avoid it. But they don't fear your judgment. They don't fear your disapproval. They don't fear losing you because you've made yourself so available, so accommodating, so endlessly forgiving, that there's no scarcity, no stakes, no reason to treat you well. The power dynamic is entirely one-sided, and you're on the losing end. Machiavelli's insight was that power flows to those who are willing to use it, and respect flows to those who inspire fear. Not through cruelty, not through unpredictability, but through the clear, consistent enforcement of standards and consequences. When you operate this way, you're not hoping people will respect you. You're not waiting for them to decide you're worthy of consideration. You're commanding respect through your very presence, through the knowledge that you are selective about who has access to you, that you enforce your boundaries, that there are real consequences for disrespect. Think about the areas of your life where you're most respected. Not liked, not loved, but genuinely respected. Chances are, these are areas where you've been most willing to enforce standards, to say no, to accept that not everyone will approve of your choices. Maybe it's your professional life where you've learned to negotiate hard, to decline projects that don't meet your standards, to walk away from opportunities that don't value you properly. Or maybe it's a specific relationship where you finally set a firm boundary and stuck to it, and the dynamic shifted entirely. Now think about the areas where you're least respected, where people consistently cross boundaries, ignore your needs, or take you for granted. These are the areas where you've been most accommodating, most eager to please, most afraid of conflict or disapproval. These are the areas where there's no fear and therefore no respect. The correlation is exact and undeniable. The shift from being loved to being feared, from seeking approval to commanding respect, requires you to embrace discomfort. It requires you to prioritize your long-term dignity over short-term harmony. It requires you to accept that some people will be upset, offended, or confused by your new boundaries. And it requires you to be okay with that, to understand that their discomfort is not your responsibility, that their adjustment to your standards is not your problem to manage. This is where most people fail. They make the shift, they set the boundary, they enforce the consequence, and then someone gets upset. And instead of holding firm, instead of recognizing that the upset is part of the process, part of people adjusting to the new reality that you're not a doormat, they backtrack, they apologize, they soften, they explain, and in doing so, they undo all the work. They teach people that if they just push back hard enough, if they make you feel guilty enough, you'll fold. And you're right back where you started. Except now you've also demonstrated that your boundaries are negotiable, and your word is meaningless. Machiavelli would tell you that the moment of resistance is the most important moment. That's when your resolve is tested, when your commitment to your own respect is measured. If you fold under pressure, you've taught people that pressure works. But if you hold firm, if you maintain the consequence despite the pushback, you've established something powerful. That you mean what you say, that your boundaries are real, and that there is indeed something to fear if they cross you. That fear, that respect, becomes the foundation of all your future interactions with that person. Let's talk about the practical implementation of strategic fear in different contexts. In your professional life, this means being willing to advocate for yourself even when it makes others uncomfortable. It means negotiating for what you're worth, declining assignments that undervalue you, and being direct about your expectations. It means not softening your achievements to make others feel better, not playing small to avoid threatening anyone, not apologizing for your success or your standards. When colleagues see that you value yourself highly and expect others to do the same, when they see that you're willing to walk away from opportunities that don't meet your standards, they respect you. They might not like it. They might prefer the version of you that was easier to work with, more accommodating, less demanding. But they respect the version of you that knows their worth and refuses to settle. In your personal relationships, strategic fear means enforcing boundaries consistently, even with people you love. It means recognizing that love doesn't obligate you to tolerate disrespect, that caring about someone doesn't mean accepting mistreatment, that maintaining a relationship isn't worth sacrificing your dignity. When someone you care about crosses a boundary, you address it immediately and implement consequences proportional to the violation. Not to punish them, but to teach them that you're serious about your boundaries, that your standards apply to everyone, that love doesn't grant immunity from consequences. This feels brutal when you first start implementing it because you've been conditioned to believe that love means endless forgiveness, infinite second chances, perpetual understanding. But that's not love. That's enabling. That's teaching people that your boundaries don't matter, that your needs are secondary, that disrespecting you has no real consequences. Strategic fear, the kind that commands respect even in intimate relationships, actually strengthens the relationship by establishing clear expectations and mutual accountability. In your social circles, commanding respect through strategic fear means being selective about who has access to you. It means recognizing that your time, energy, and presence are valuable resources that not everyone deserves. It means being willing to distance yourself from people who drain you, disrespect you, or take advantage of your generosity. It means understanding that saying no to people who add no value to your life isn't mean, it's necessary. When your social circle sees that you're selective, that you enforce standards, that you're willing to remove people who don't meet them, those who remain treat you differently. They recognize that access to you is a privilege, not a right. They fear losing that access, and that fear manifests as respect. The beautiful irony is that when you stop trying so hard to be loved and start commanding respect through strategic fear, you often end up being loved more genuinely anyway. Because the people who remain in your life, the ones who can meet your standards and respect your boundaries, are the ones capable of genuine connection. They don't love you because you make their life easy, with no expectation of reciprocity. They love you because they respect who you are, what you stand for, and how you carry yourself. That love, built on a foundation of respect and healthy fear, is deeper and more sustainable than the shallow affection you got from being everyone's favorite doormat. Machiavelli's wisdom isn't about rejecting love or connection. It's about understanding that respect is the prerequisite for any relationship worth having, and that respect comes from fear more reliably than it comes from love. When people fear you, fear losing you, fear disappointing you, fear the consequences of disrespecting you, they treat you well, not because they're afraid you'll hurt them, but because they're afraid of losing something valuable. That's the fear you want to inspire. The fear of loss. The fear that if they don't treat you well, if they don't respect your boundaries, if they don't reciprocate your investment, you'll remove yourself from their life without hesitation or guilt. You've been taught that this kind of selectivity is cold, that this kind of boundary enforcement is harsh, that this kind of willingness to walk away is cruel. But it's not. It's self-respect. It's dignity. It's understanding that you don't owe anyone access to you, that relationships are privileges earned and maintained through mutual respect, and that no connection is worth sacrificing your sovereignty. The people who benefit from your lack of boundaries, the ones who exploit your endless forgiveness and unconditional tolerance, they're the ones who want you to believe that setting boundaries is mean, because your boundaries threaten their free access to your resources. Here's what happens when you fully embrace this Machiavellian principle. When you prioritize being feared over being loved. When you command respect through strategic fear rather than seeking it through accommodation. Your life changes. Not overnight, not without discomfort, but definitively. The people who were using you drift away. The relationships that were based on you giving and them taking end. The dynamics where you were perpetually accommodating, perpetually understanding, perpetually secondary, they collapse. And for a moment it feels lonely, it feels scary, it feels like maybe you made a mistake. But then something else happens. The space left by the users and takers gets filled by a different kind of person. People who have their own boundaries and respect yours. People who value reciprocity and practice it. People who see your selectivity not as meanness but as standards. Your boundaries not as rejection but as self-respect. These people don't need to fear punishment from you because they already fear losing you. They already understand that you're someone valuable, someone selective, someone who won't tolerate disrespect. And that fear keeps the relationship healthy, balanced, mutual. You also discover something about yourself in this process. You discover that you're stronger than you thought, that you can tolerate disapproval without collapsing, that you can enforce boundaries without the sky falling, that you can prioritize your own respect without becoming a monster. You discover that the fear you had, that being feared would make you lonely, would make you the villain, would make you someone you don't recognize, was unfounded. You're not a villain. You're just someone with standards, someone who values themselves, someone who refuses to be disrespected. Machiavelli was controversial in his time, and remains controversial now because he told truths that make people uncomfortable. He removed the comforting illusions about virtue and goodness, automatically leading to success and respect. He showed that the world rewards power, that people respond to fear, that respect comes not from being good, but from being formidable. These truths threaten the moral framework that keeps people compliant, accommodating, afraid to prioritize themselves. The powers that benefit from your compliance don't want you to embrace Machiavellian principles. They want you to keep being nice, keep sacrificing, keep tolerating disrespect in the name of being good. But you're starting to see through that framework. You're starting to recognize that being good, in the way you've been taught to be good, has made you perpetually disrespected. That your niceness has been weaponized against you. That your desire to be loved has made you exploitable. And you're ready for a different approach. An approach that prioritizes your dignity over other people's comfort. An approach that commands respect through strategic fear, rather than hoping for it through endless accommodation. This isn't about becoming someone you're not. It's about becoming who you actually are underneath all the conditioning, all the people-pleasing, all the desperate attempts to be liked and approved of. Underneath all that, you know your worth. You know what you deserve. You know what you'll tolerate, and what you won't. The shift to commanding respect through fear isn't about adding something foreign to your personality. It's about removing the layers of conditioning that have kept you from enforcing your own standards, from protecting your own dignity, from demanding the respect you deserve. The question isn't whether Machiavelli was right. The question is whether you're ready to accept that he was right. That respect comes from fear more reliably than from love. That people treat you well not because they care about you, but because they fear the consequences of treating you poorly. That your kindness without enforcement is weakness. Your patience without boundaries is permission. Your love without respect is exploitation. The evidence is in your own life. Look at who respects you and who doesn't. Look at the relationships where you're valued and the relationships where you're taken for granted. The pattern is clear. You've been living in a world where you're afraid of everyone else, and they fear nothing from you. You're afraid of their judgment, their disapproval, their rejection. And because you live in that fear, you accommodate, you compromise, you sacrifice your own needs and boundaries to avoid their discomfort. But they don't fear your judgment. They don't fear your disapproval. They don't fear losing you. And that imbalance is why you're perpetually disrespected, perpetually undervalued, perpetually taken for granted. The shift Machiavelli offers you is the shift from living in fear to inspiring it. Not by being cruel or unpredictable, but by being firm, consistent, and unapologetic in your standards. By making it clear through your actions that you are someone who enforces boundaries, someone who implements consequences, someone who is selective about who has access to their time, energy, and presence. When you make that shift, when you become someone people fear losing, fear disappointing, fear disrespecting, the entire dynamic of your life changes. People start treating you differently. They think before they speak. They consider before they act. They respect your time because they know wasting it has consequences. They respect your boundaries because they know violating them means losing access. They respect your standards because they know you'll enforce them without hesitation or guilt. This isn't manipulation. This isn't game playing. This is simply the natural result of being someone who values themselves, who has clear standards, and who is willing to enforce them, regardless of who's uncomfortable with it. Your entire life you've been told that the path to respect is through being good, being kind, being selfless, being accommodating. And you've tried that path. You've walked it diligently, sacrificing yourself at every turn, hoping that eventually people would recognize your goodness and treat you with the respect you deserve. But they didn't. They took advantage. They exploited your kindness. They mistook your patience for weakness. And now you're here, tired, resentful, undervalued, wondering why being good hasn't gotten you the respect you were promised? Machiavelli has the answer. Because goodness alone doesn't command respect. Power does. Consequences do. Fear does. When people fear you, not your violence, not your cruelty, but your willingness to enforce boundaries and remove yourself from situations that don't serve you, they respect you. When they know you're not desperate for their approval, not afraid of their judgment, not going to tolerate disrespect just to maintain the relationship, they treat you differently. They treat you better. Not because they've suddenly become better people, but because the fear of losing access to you, the fear of consequences, keeps them honest. This is the truth you've been avoiding because it conflicts with everything you've been taught about being a good person. But the question isn't whether you're a good person. The question is whether you're a respected person, whether your life reflects your worth, whether your relationships are reciprocal and healthy, whether people treat you the way you deserve to be treated. And if the answer to any of those questions is no, then maybe it's time to stop prioritizing being loved and start prioritizing being feared. Because being feared, in the Machiavellian sense, is being respected, and respect is what changes everything. So here's your choice. Continue down the path of seeking respect through love, through accommodation, through being endlessly understanding and forgiving, hoping that eventually people will voluntarily choose to treat you well. Or embrace the Machiavellian principle that respect comes from fear, from consequences, from the clear knowledge that you are someone with standards who will enforce them without hesitation. One path has gotten you where you are now, undervalued, taken for granted, perpetually waiting for the respect you deserve. The other path might be uncomfortable, might make you unpopular with people who benefit from your compliance, but it leads to something you've been seeking your entire life: genuine respect. Machiavelli wasn't teaching cruelty. He was teaching sovereignty. He was teaching self-respect. He was teaching that your dignity matters more than other people's comfort, that your boundaries matter more than other people's convenience, that your standards matter more than other people's opinions. When you live by these principles, when you prioritize being feared over being loved, you're not becoming a villain. You're becoming someone who respects themselves enough to demand that others do the same. And that's not just Machiavellian wisdom. That's essential truth. If this resonated with you, if you're ready to stop being disrespected and start commanding the respect you deserve, subscribe for more content that challenges the comfortable lies you've been told and reveals the essential truths about power, respect, and sovereignty. Hit the like button if you're ready to embrace strategic fear over desperate love. And comment below with the one relationship or area of your life where you're going to start implementing this Machiavellian principle today. Because the truth is, respect doesn't come from being good. It comes from being formidable. And you're about to discover just how powerful that truth can be.